I have something to admit. It's season 2, episode 34, and I have yet to push out episode 32 and 33. They're sitting in the cloud, and I need to do something with them to push them out, but this room that I'm in right now, I've not been able. We do the podcast. I leave the room, and I can't get back in the room to do the post production stuff.
There's I get it. I sort of get up. It's funny sometimes when I get up from the desk. So my room's the basement. Can obviously see it. Well, maybe you can't see that from the video, but yeah. So I'm in the basement, my workspace where I do creative stuff, where I just kind of, I guess, where I make. And it's funny. Often I get up from the desk here, and I guess I've gotten, I think initially, it was weird. Initially, when we first started doing this, when I got up from the table, I was really, okay, so how do I stage it? So I think initially when we started doing this podcast, I'd get up from the table afterwards and I had this sort of sense of accomplishment. Like, there we go. Episode done. Like, one and done. Got it locked. It's going to get out into the cloud somewhere. I mean, I'm aware of the work that you do on the back end. And from there, it's sort of like at some point it's gonna be uploaded. He's gonna do what he does, where he posts it and it gets connected with iTunes and it goes to the cloud. And so it was sort of a sense of just closure, one and done. Kind of like in the middle of the middle third. So somewhere, maybe this time last year, maybe a little bit earlier, I started to be more aware of it. It got a little bit more. I don't know. I guess I would get up from the table and I would be thinking to myself, geez, another one done. Pretty remarkable. Got season 1 creeping up on the end of season 1. And then I started doing the wondering whether or not we were going to do this season 2. And it was probably sometime around this time last year that we were talking about what season 2 could be about. And it's funny, but sometime, I won't say nostalgic, but then I started to think back. This ties in well to what we were talking about in the on-ramp too, about collecting our kids' artifacts, right? So and whether or not you sort of value some of the gobs and gobs of paperwork that your kids bring home. So I started, if I put that about the podcast, I started to think about the amount of time that we had invested in it, and started thinking about had I contributed to something that has value. Like, have I created something? Have I played into something? And then all of a sudden, it was funny, coming into our summer school editions, I was kind of jacked up. I was like, yeah, you know what? This is a thing. We're going to keep doing this. We're, Chidiac's on the same page. He wants to do a second season, so we'll go for it. And it was funny. It kind of shifted a little bit. And as we're coming around again to the end, I'm kind of back at that space where I'm getting a little nostalgic and thinking about the value. Did I put in value? Did I sort of put my best into it? And I find now when I get up from the table, when I get up from the table, I have a sense of completion. I have a sense of sort of like the body of work that we've done. But I find now I can just transition into my day. Like, I don't feel. It's funny, anyone listening to this podcast, this hour and change that you and I spend together is just a snippet of our actual podcast. And what I mean by that is that you and I are bouncing stuff back and forth all week, just kind of having chats. Sometimes our texts and our tweet shares are just for our kind of entertainment or information. But it's almost like, I mean, you've said it. Yeah, I think you put it on the t-shirt, is that the podcast is more, DeCodEd is more than just the podcast. There's a whole back end of life that kind of, this just happens to be one of the pages from DeCodEd. So it's funny. I find more and more now when I get up from the table, get up to the table and go on to my day, there's an assurance that we're going to come back here at some point. And I won't say it kind of crystallizes our talking in the week. We don't always summarize. We don't always we'll grab from it, but there could be something that we just kind of throw at each other in the on-ramp that sparks up our conversation. But you got me thinking about that sort of like the artifactual value of thinking about reflecting on what we've created here. And I don't do that well with chasing squirrels. Like those are I almost think of those as it's pretty staccato. Like I don't see a through line through them. It's like somebody that I find fascinating. I want to find out more. There's a story there. There's something that they're creating, but I don't always have a through line to it. And it's funny how that it kind of messes with my head a little bit, because often I'll look at the content that I have there on chasing squirrels. I was like, what am I doing? Like what am I? Well, I guess maybe that's the whole thing about chasing squirrels. Let's be honest. Like I don't really know what I'm pursuing. I'm just kind of like, here's another interesting thing about EDU. But I've settled into a connection with DeCodEd that, if you decided that you took 3 weeks to post or 4 weeks, it's not that I'm assuming that I'm not assuming that you'll do it just because it's your responsibility to do it, so to speak. Like I'm not dumping it in your lap. I think we had that conversation once or twice. Like I can post some too or whatever, but I've settled into an ease with this podcast that I feel like it really does dance well with what the needs of my life and my space and kind of like the work that I do. So you post it whenever you get to it. Yeah, it's funny. And it's where I will say that it's really what I really, really dig is the fact that I get the grind. And this is one of our earlier conversations. I get the grind of putting together in-time delivery or timely delivery of content. And I think at some point, if DeCodEd was about satisfying an audience other than you and I, it would be a very different podcast. It'd be a very different podcast. And in some ways, it's taken, I think, our relaxed approach to this to help me self-identify what my position on podcasting is, which has to be a little bit more relaxed. Like I think the process that we've engaged in here has actually made me more mindful of what I want to do with podcasting and producing this type of content. And I think it's allowed me to kind of back off some of that intensity that we've talked about before, about chasing the next. And even though, my other space is called Chasing Squirrels, I'm far more leisurely at that now. Like I'm not telling myself I have to find another person that's going to talk about this topic. I'm more sort of just being, the things that I'm curious about don't have to result in a podcast about it right away. And I've kind of learned that from this space, mostly because, like I said, this is just a snapshot of the podcast. When you and I actually get to sit down and chat, there's so much more back end that has happened. There's a far larger percentage of discussions that you and I have engaged in. So that's all I got to say about that.
I appreciate the fact that you let me do my thing with the back end of the podcast, and I don't feel pressure like, oh, Chris is gonna wonder what's going on. No, I know you get it. We've talked about it before. It happens when it happens. If you wanted to do it, you do it. But I know you've got other things. Like it's not a big deal, and I'm glad that you're on the same page with that. It's not a big deal. I think it's interesting that you're saying about your podcast and the fact that you've become more leisurely in the way that you approach it. That's cool. I also think that if we had to do this podcast for someone else, I don't think it might not happen. Now that we're so deep into the way we do it and how we do it and why we do it, if somebody walked in and said, I need you to do this for me and I want it to look like this, I don't think you and I would be able to do it. Like I mean, I think we wouldn't want to. I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Who asked you to come talk to us? Kind of like,
how'd you find us?
yeah, why are you here?
How'd you get in the door?
I don't know. I think it's just, I think the recipe we have for what we're doing here is the recipe for what we're doing here. So this is decoded. A little bit of this, a sprinkle of that. Leave this stuff out of the equation, and this is what you get. It's different. Like when I think back to the podcast I used to have, which I really enjoy looking back on, because during the time I was doing it, it's what I wanted to do. And so doing what you want to do is pretty cool. But there was a little bit of a formula to it because there were certain questions I wanted answers to. But other than that, it was pretty wide open. And I tried not to be that guy that had 20 questions that had to be answered. I just had 2 or 3 that were the essence of the purpose of why I was doing the podcast. Mm-hmm. And other than that, it was anything goes, like whatever you want to talk about. And surprisingly enough, now that I think about it, there were a handful of people that wanted to know what I wanted to talk about with them before going on air. And I don't know if that was just like they needed to feel prepared because that's who they are. And I respect that 100%. Or I don't know if they felt like, is this guy going to try to sandbag me? So I need an idea of what he's doing. And that's a weird one, because if you look back on all the episodes I did coming up to the one that I was going to do with you, you would see from reading the blog and maybe listening to bits and pieces here and there that my intention was never to sandbag anybody. And so it's just interesting when you and I have talked about this, where people might say no to you. They don't want to come onto the podcast because then what they say is etched in stone for the rest of time. And they're worried they might say something they shouldn't say. But if they just listen to the work you do, I felt like I was in a submarine. When you moved your mic, it made like
swoosh? Swoosh?
No, not swoosh, like a deep water sonar sound or something.
Oh, nice. Sorry about that.
Well, it's okay. I was just like,
I was checking my pencil count, my marker count in front of me. I'm like, okay, what am I going to grab?
I was like, should I be talking this loud? Are we that deep? Anyway, that's the laughable stuff when I think about the podcast and asking people if they wanted to come on. Some would be like, yeah, man, let's do it. And others would be like, well, what do you want to talk about? Why would I come on? And I tell them, like, this is what I do. And then that awkward, now we're talking about podcasting, but that awkward moment of they don't want to come on, but they don't know how to say no. And I'm just like, just spit it out, just say no. But they don't want to say no because they're so used to saying yes to everything that people ask of them. They don't know how to say no anymore. They don't want to hurt my feelings. My feelings are hurt all the time. And it's not because of you. All kinds of other things happen every day that hurt my feelings. But here I am. I'm still doing my thing.
I remember back in, back when I was doing, I think it was either my second to last or my last year of doing alt ed before I shifted out to the different portfolio of working with the kids on suspension and expulsion. And the school at the time decided that they were, because it was kind of like a core of us teachers that were involved in that alt ed programming. And there was some shifts and some staffing stuff. So they kind of went outside the bubble a little bit. And what I mean by the bubble is just there were teachers that were interested in teaching in that context. And there's not a specific qualification to be in there because it's multi-subject, right? I found that individuals that have maybe some guidance training, maybe some spec ed training, maybe some co-op training, they kind of have some of the tools that connect well with the interests and curiosities of the students that are in there. So when they went outside the bubble of the individuals that were really interested in teaching in alt ed, one of the teachers came to me. His name's Steve, and he said, "Okay, what do I have to prepare? What do I have to prepare to be in here?" And I told him flat out, I said, we have all of our courses. We've spent 4 years developing all the binders for the courses, and the backbone of these courses are there for you. You can create, you can sort of change, switch up. We're happy for you to do that. I mean, it just makes the courses richer. I said, but you don't have to prepare anything to come in. We just need you to arrive and start doing what you do best, which is connect with kids. Now, the two individuals, Steve in particular, was I think he was more of the right. He had the right sort of open mindset to embrace that reality. And his response was, he started teaching. So for just to give a context, like in a period, you could have been, I guess, teaching, moderating, facilitating, supporting, whatever word fits best to help someone understand what alt ed is. But at the time, the cap clap was 16 kids. In theory, you could be facilitating 16 different courses, in theory, because the course came with the kid. Now, this was pretty freaky for teachers to wrap their head around, because they're looking at it from the point of view as like one person is sort of disseminating one course to 30 kids. So the focal point is like this. When you flip it and they're all single lines going out to 16 kids, that can be pretty stressful. And the truth is, there's no magic. You're up and down, you're up and down, you're up and down, you're micro lesson, you're using whiteboards, you're using digital, you're like multi-directional in your differentiation. So we were fortunate with Steve, because Steve was also like, he was a compassionate, empathetic instructor, solid dude, great sense of humor, and just willing to sort of be in spaces with the students and just kind of explore and to trust and to be a little bit vulnerable. So when he came in, all I could say to him, I said, you don't have to develop any courses. I'm pretty thrilled that you're kind of in here and you're bringing a really cool toolbox, the way you connect with kids, again, your sense of humor, you're approachable. A lot of the students in the school know of you, so you have a good rep. After about 2 weeks, he said, it's really tough. It's really tough teaching in here. He said, but what I really enjoy is connecting with the kids. He said, I think back on having a classroom of 30 kids and knowing that there was 3 or 4 in there that I'm just never going to be able to get to in a way that I really want to. And I would see them and I'd know their names. They were like I like to use the example of, when you're kind of swimming in a lake, probably more in an ocean, and you kind of just feel like you're sort of like floating on the waves. And then you look up and you see that your family is all the way over there on the beach, and you realize how you've kind of drifted. And you really have to work to try to get back in line with your family. I think that was the sense that he was having. Like, he really had to work to get back in alignment with the kids that he felt he was floating away from. But the truth of it is, there were 28 other kids that were kind of in his way. So getting to those kids was difficult. His words was, I'm finally making a connection with the kids that I've observed at the back of the class for many years now, which just reinforced that he had the absolute right mindset to be doing alt ed. Big sidebar example, but it was that when I think about the podcast and the people, or podcasting, I mean, and you and I are outside this loop, when I think about the passion project away from this, the sort of the one-to-one conversations, is that in asking people to talk publicly or openly about their practice, the idea of not having to prep something has some pretty interesting, like, it's pretty reactionary. I've had people want questions ahead of time. And I've also had other people who I've asked, it's interesting, and they know of DeCodEd, and they've openly said, kind of just like flat out said, yeah, it feels like I'm just kind of listening in on a conversation. Like it feels like it's just two buds talking about EDU and fatherhood. And I'll take that as a compliment. Like that makes sense. I think that's kind of like that's where we're existing we're not necessarily branding or pushing towards it, because all of a sudden then it's like a list of questions. And the second part to that is like, yeah, I could never do that. And so this is their response to what you and I are doing here in DeCodEd. I've also had other people say to me, it's interesting. I've had other people say to me, well, is that professional development? Like, is that really what professional development is? And I have to leave it to other people to kind of measure that. That's their task. That's for them to figure out whether it's professional development. But like I said, kind of in the beginning, when I was talking about DeCodEd's effect on me, is that it's really made me, it's brought together the fact that PD is mindful. This is the space where I really do feel like professional development lives as a mindful practice. And I'm probably going to spend the rest of my career trying to figure out how to seed regular PD, the stuff that happens in school, with the sense and sentiment that I feel here in our DeCodEd conversations. And I've had some people say, yeah, I can't talk on squirrels because I can't do, there's been a lot of reasons, but I have had people say, like, I'm not ready to talk about my practice like that out in the open. I forget, it's funny. One thing I'll pause when I sort of pause in my own thinking. I often forget the actual, I easily forget how far I've come in the practice of publicly talking about my practice. Does that make sense? And it's sometimes when I run into somebody that when they say, yeah, they say a couple things. Yeah, podcasts are kind of a thing. So someone that would say that strikes me as someone that's kind of like just newly figuring out that podcasts are, well, a thing. And then other people say, when I say to them, would you like to talk on a podcast? Oh, no. But you talk to them a little bit longer and they kind of start off with the no. And then you start talking to them a little bit and they're like, like they kind of get curious about it. And all of these little checkpoints remind me of all the stuff that I've already forgotten about doing this practice, from the setting up of the tech to not just the setup of the tech, actually even having tech, right? Having the bits and pieces that look like you're podcasting, to feeling comfortable with being on YouTube. We've put a ton of content onto YouTube, and I don't see it really stopping. There's no reason for it to stop. Even if I'm going to guess that even if you and I stopped DeCodEd in our own way, we would probably still be posting content to YouTube. It's become, as you've coined, that fluency. We're both kind of deep in that fluency. I've said to a couple teachers at my school, like, do you want to, I'm more than happy. We can have a conversation on chasing squirrels. And that is where this is making cool things happen in my life away from this. Because in the past, I would have been so much more focused on finding the story as opposed to a story that's worth promoting and kind of putting out there. Like, I think that's what our conversation has led me to understand, that no matter the focus of the week and whatever happens to fixate you about education, or in our case, fatherhood, and kind of living throughout those 7 days between our conversations, that sometimes just landing and using that as the sort of like launch pad to a different convo makes for better conversation. PD is conversation, I believe, is a solid mindful practice. Getting people to buy into that without worrying about the quantitative is pretty challenging.
If PD is conversation, then I don't do enough of it at work, because I'm not walking around conversing with everybody at work. And the other thing is that what I talk about here and how I talk about it here, I don't do this at work either. Well, I don't do this really anywhere except here. And I think maybe that's why I find this time so valuable, why I value this podcast and the things we talk about, and why and how, is because this is where I do it. Saturday or Sunday mornings, before like people are actually awake. we're talking about reflecting on our week and things we did and things we didn't do and the stuff that we're doing with our family. It's interesting. Like it really has me thinking. And that's, I think for me, that's important that I be thinking. And that's what this does. These conversations do. And I'm not really tired of it yet. So, this is like the second season. We're coming up to the end of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really tired of it. Like I think it's just, it's, I don't know. I don't even know how to talk about it. It's one of those weird things that you can feel inside but you can't get the words to connect with the feelings around it.
It's so maybe, and we've I've started to dig into connections at my school and try to tried to build relationships, tried to make sort of friends, and that's kind of a new space for me. I was saying to Karen the other night, I was like, you know what, I go deep. I go deep in sort of observing people and kind of having conversations about the things that come from the observations. But there's a real introversion to me that becomes kind of pure information sometimes. And I don't always sort of push it into a space where I become where I go relatable, where I sort of like try and build it beyond just that conversation. And I think where I've started to grow, where I've tried to push myself a little bit into that, I guess I'll call it the discomfort zone, is kind of focusing on the gains of making those relationship connections that are more than just talking about curriculum or talking about supporting students. I think that, and I guess it's an aha moment for me. For others, it might not be such an aha moment that they openly say they have people that they would call friends and not just, let's say, colleagues, but really friendships at school where you may, you crave connecting with them away from school time. And again, I'll bring it back to DeCodEd. The work that it does take work to stay connected with you. I mean, we don't run into each other on the daily. We're using digital means to keep a very real sense of real life associated with our relationship. And it's given me the opportunity to kind of, I think, go one step deeper, because I always agreed with you about when you have curiosity and you have a little bit of drive and you want to find out something more about education, there are multi-platforms that you can connect with people and kind of ask the questions and feel like you have a conversation. But there's another level within that sort of digital connection where I like that sense of looking at my PLN as people that, and this is now my extension to we can't meet everybody all the time, which I think is your part that brings to this, the digital. I think I'm getting a better sense of, but I really crave to, like, I still want to have that as part of the wraparound to that kernel, that you have the opportunity to connect with a bunch of people. And I still want to meet with those people in real time at some point. Or let's say worst case scenario, if we were to encounter one another, we would actually recognize each other. It's not just that the relationship exists solely in digital. The equivalent example I would kind of put is like when you see your students away from school. It's like the inverse of that. You're sort of like, when you see somebody outside of a context, are you as sort of open and like, hey, how you doing? Like, can you sort of code switch to where you're kind of no longer in that communication frame of like teacher student or Twitter friend and Twitter friend? Can you shift into something else that isn't uncomfortable and awkward? So the push for me this year is that I'm around a lot of like in real life relationships, and it's different even from what my previous stop when I was in alt ed, where we were kind of like pushed off way and down one corner of the building. Like we really were kind of away from the crowd. The school that I'm at right now, I feel like I'm part of a bigger organism, and it's taken a little bit of time for me to open up to that and not just kind of like stay in my classroom and just kind of be away and kind of work in the community classrooms that I'm involved with. And a part of that is what we've developed here. Like it's the idea that I can have both a professional and personal relationship with you. I can have that professional and personal relationship with my colleagues. And I'm also capable of kind of nurturing both at the same time. Because in the past, I would have always thought I have to choose one over the other. I have to sort of kind of decide what direction that's going to go. And I'm finding that I'm not very good at it. It almost seems like, for example, one of my friends there, I was like, you know what? I would love to just hang out. Like I actually had to say, as I'm saying the words, I'm like, God, this sounds like my kids talking about having a play date. And I always think about like, when my kids say, can I go call on Henry for a play date? I'm like, dude, don't say play date. Just go down and knock on the door. Just go down, show up at their house, knock at the door and say, can so-and-so come out to play? I'm trying to embrace that mentality with the people at work. Just flat out. Hey, you want to go for coffee? Hey, I'm going to grab lunch. You want to go grab lunch? I need to go for some ramen. Can we go do you know anywhere that we can go for ramen after school? And it's tough, man. It's tough. I don't make friends well. I'm starting to realize, or maybe I do. It doesn't, I'm not, my brain is just sort of flipping through too many things. I don't easily just go knock on the door, just call them person, go do it.
It's
how
funny
did I even go through? That was a whole lot of.
It's funny how some people can do that though. Some people have no problem doing that. Going up to the door, knocking and saying, hey, what's up? You want to hang?
Mm-hmm.
And I was always, when I was younger, well, still now, those people frighten me a little bit.
Why is that?
Like, because that's not who I am. That's not how I do it. Right? So how I do it is like, there's always a little bit of pre-preparation. Like, for example, the other night, my wife and I are sitting in the family room, TV's on, we're both kind of doing whatever. The doorbell rings.
I only laugh because I know. Yeah. So
we look at each other and we're like,
step one, you look at each other. Step two is what?
Step two is, well, I think we both have a different step too. She's like, who the hell is this? And I'm like, I'm not getting it.
Yeah. Well, then you're moving into step three. It's the negotiation.
Step three is the negotiation. Do we get it? Do we not get it? And then it was like
maybe somewhere in there. Can you see the door from where you're sitting?
No, like I can't see who's there from where I'm sitting.
So that's one of the optional ones, because if we were sort of sitting in our TV room, one of the couches can see the door. So the expectation would be whoever can see the door is like, that's like prime, right? And the funny thing is you get the information, but kind of if you were sitting on that couch, the window on our front door is sort of kaleidoscopic. Like the beveling of the glass doesn't allow you to see right in. I'm sure that's an intentional design, but you kind of, if you look just right, you can kind of see right in to that couch. So you got to be cautious, right? Because if you're looking out the door to sort of see who it is, they could be looking back at you. And at that point, you're tagged, right? It's like somebody out there knows that there's someone in the house.
Okay. I want to do two things with that. The first thing is, what is more satisfying than they see you and you see them and you still don't get up to get the door?
I espouse that one. I sort of espouse the choice. That's what I'll say too. I'm like, you don't have to answer the door.
No, you don't. In my old house, it was an open concept, like big time open concept. So you could see, like, you could see right in to where people would sit and hang out, and we could see right out to you. We could see, I could be sitting on my couch and I could look straight out the front door and down the street into the court. Like I could actually see that stuff. I could see who's in the court, what they're doing. From where they are, they couldn't see me, but if they came right up to the door, they could. And there were times where the doorbell would ring and I'd look and it'd be some person I've never seen before in my life. And I could tell by what they were wearing, how they were standing, that they're probably there to sell me something. And I'm like, I'm not getting the door. So you can look in here and you can eyeball me all you want. Go away. I'm not getting the door. Now, in the house we live in now, there are some angles and moments where I can see one of the windows beside the door, but then if I can see them, they can see me. So it's just the doorbell rings and I'm like, and I've told my brother-in-law, my mother and father-in-law know, like, if you're just gonna pop by and ring the doorbell, chances are nobody's getting the door. So send me a text and tell me you're dropping something off or you need to pick something up or whatever. Just like, or I'm not getting the door. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to. Like, I don't really care what they think of that. Like, I'm sure that my in-laws probably think it's the rudest thing ever, but I don't care. It's like if I go to their house, I try not to cold call anybody, actually. I try not to cold call anybody. I try my hardest to message somebody or email them and say, listen, I got this. I'm going to drop it off. I'm thinking around this time. Let me know if it's bad. If I don't hear from you, I'll just go. But yeah, the cold call. So anyway, the doorbell rings and my wife's like, who is this? It's like 9:45. And I'm kind of thinking the same thing. Then it hit me. I'm like, oh, it's the neighbor. It's one of the neighbors on the street. Had to give me something and it was time sensitive. And I guess that was the only time because it was a baseball night. So we were out at baseball with the kids, come home, put them to bed. And then, he's like, I'm going to head over there and give Roland what he had to give me. And so I said to her, I bet it's so-and-so. So I went to the door and it was him. But yeah, if it was if you're the police or something, you're going to knock loud and you're going to tell me who you are. But if you're just trying to sell me something, I'm not getting the door. I'm not interested. And, it could be for a really good cause. I'm just not interested. I don't want to go and open the door and talk to you. The last time, and it's tough, right? Because it depends on the time. Because there's some time where it's going to be my son's friends who they've not grown up in a world where, or maybe they have, but they're not messaging you saying I'm coming over. They're riding their bike and they're like, hey, that's where Chidiac lives. I'm going to stop and see if he wants to come out and play. That's cool. We tell them you're not answering the door. You can go to the door and you can look out the window and you can make a connection with the person and let us know who it is, but you're not opening that door. Because I don't know about you, man, but and now we're taking a real turn here, but here's the dad in me. I've had moments of like, I do have some fear that someone's going to come to my door and want somebody to open that door so they can try to get in or whatever. I know it sounds whacked, but I've got a story that backs it, and I'll share that in a second. But I always tell my kids, do not open the door because you don't know who's behind that adult or that kid. You get me to do it, or you get your mom to do it. And if they don't understand, then too bad for them. But at my old house, our first house, the kids were really young. Like, I think my oldest was maybe like 4 and my youngest was 1. And the doorbell rang and we were upstairs, so they couldn't see in, but the doorbell rang and I looked out the bedroom window, and I didn't see any cars or anything. So I'm like, okay, well, it's not family because they would have pulled in the driveway or whatever. And then, so nobody gets the door for like 10 seconds. And then the doorbell starts going crazy, like ding, 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 ding.
Hmm.
So my youngest, he says, Daddy, I'm going to go look. And I'm like, okay. And at the time, he couldn't unlatch the locks and stuff. So you want to look? You want to look? He's like, and it was a house where right at the bottom of the stairs, you could stand there and you could see who was at the door. So he had a weird look on his face. So I came down and there was a young man at the door. I'm guessing like late teens, early 20s. And now he's banging on the door and he's saying, help me. They're chasing me. Let me in.
Wow.
And so I go to the door and I say, because now he's looking in the window, I'm like, who's chasing you? They're chasing me. Let me in. And he's banging on the door. And I said, okay, I'm going to call the police. So I go grab the phone, call 911, come back to the door, and he's gone. So
Okay.
I'm on the phone with 911, and they're like, what's your emergency? There's a guy at my door, banging on my door, yelling at me, open the door. They're chasing me. They're going to get me. And she's like, well, where's this person now? And I'm like, I don't know. He's disappeared. She's like, what do you mean he's disappeared? I'm like, as I was dialing 911, he was at the door yelling and screaming. And then when I told him I'm calling the police, he took off.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, okay, we'll send somebody. But after that moment, I was like, this is insane. This is insane. Like, what if? So here's the thing here's the thing that really rubs me. I opened the door and let him in to try to be a good soul and protect this person from whatever's happening, and find out this person's got issues, or there's 5 people behind him who are getting into my house to do whatever. And now I feel like a real fool. But then I feel like, okay, there are people chasing him. He's in danger, and I'm not doing anything to help him. And that really sucks too. But at the end of the day, I land on what's best for my family and the people in my home. And I'm not letting you in if I don't know who you are. And if you have a problem, I have no issues calling the police and getting help, or even finding a way to get outside outside without opening that front door, because I'm not interested in having a situation. So I always tell my kids, you're not opening the door. And I don't go to people's house. I don't go to strangers' houses. So I don't know what it's like for a little kid you ring the doorbell, they open the door and they let you in or whatever. Like, I don't know that. I don't get that. So I talk to Sarah about this all the time. We need a sticker on our door that says like no solicitation. I don't want to buy your cookies. I don't want to donate to your charity. If I do, then I'll find a way to do it. I don't want you to come to my door. And like before we started the podcast, I was telling you about something. And I remember I just threw my hands up. I said, that's how I am. And I'm not willing to change that part of me. This is another part of me I'm not willing to change. Don't come to my door and ask me for money. If I want to give you money, I'll find a way to get you the money. Don't come to my door and ask me to buy your cookies. I don't want to buy your cookies.
I like this conversation.
I kind of like it too. I don't like the way, as I'm saying it, I don't like the way it sounds, but it's the way it is. It's the way it is. Here's a good one for you too. Here's a cold call, but I think sometimes they're worth it. So I'll look out the window sometimes and I'll see, and depending on what's happening outside the window, I might open the door and I might not. And I have no problem with you seeing me walk past the door to look out the window. That shame doesn't do anything for me. I don't feel a sense of, oh, you saw me, I should open the door. That doesn't exist anymore. It may have earlier on, but I went to check the mail a couple of weeks ago, and when I got to my mailbox, I noticed that the little box beside mine had the key in it. Somebody left the key in the box. So I opened their box because I know inside their box the number of their house will be there. The postal worker took a Sharpie one day, or I guess this is their practice, I don't know, but wrote on the inside of every box is your address so that they know where to put the mail. So I opened the box and I see, oh, this is the neighbor to my right. So I close the box, take the key out, and as I'm walking back to my house, I stop at their house, ring the doorbell, and hope that they answer the door so I can say, you left your mail key in the box, here it is. Well, nobody answers the door. I don't have their phone number. I don't really know them that well. They don't speak English. Like, there's many factors that make it difficult to communicate and to get a hold of them. So I'm like, okay, well, they're not answering the door. So I go into my garage and I just place it somewhere where I'll remember, and then the next morning I'll try again or whatever. So the next day comes, and I see all their cars in the driveway. So I go and I knock on the door, ring the doorbell. Nobody comes to the door. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not upset because this is how I roll. I'm not answering the door either. But then I'm like, but I got to get them their key. And I don't know, maybe they've realized they've lost their key and they're in the process of getting a new one when they don't need to. I have it. So instead of ringing the doorbell, I just bang on the door like 3 times, bang, 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 hoping that someone's like, what's going on? Let me check. Somebody comes to the door, they open the door, and the look on their face was awesome. The look of shock. Like, why is my neighbor at my door? I only talk to him when he's cutting the grass. Why is he here? Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tell them, look, you left your key in the mailbox yesterday. I'm giving it to you so that somebody else doesn't take it or whatever gets lost. They're like very appreciative, and that's cool. Sometimes that happens. But far too many times people come to the door that want to sell me something. And, it just rubs me the wrong way. Like the last time it happened, I answered the door. It was some young guy trying to sell me meat. So he's like, we're going to give you a free box of meat. The first thing I said, well, what's the catch? He goes, well, we have to come into your house and do a 30-minute presentation. I'm like, dude, it's over. I don't care. Like if you've got the Lancaster ribs in that box, you're not coming in here to talk to me.
That's cold because that's like you're in total lockdown. But context too, right? Like context. Like if you've never had them in the restaurant, then you might not know what you're missing out on. So I don't know. Like, you willing to pay the premium to not eat it in where you can, smell the smoke and everything else about it? But keep going.
You're not coming in my house.
Not coming in my house. Yeah.
I don't even let my friends in my house. Why would I let a stranger come in? And well, remember when we had that conversation when you were in town, and we kind of stumbled upon. It was in a joking way.
It was about how we're going to meet up. How do you want to meet up? Yeah. And I will tell you. So I will tell you flat out that I hear everything you said, but there is a possibility that I will cold call you at some point. I will say that flat out, and I hope you know that about me. And I hope you sort of get that about me. You don't have to accept it. And sorry, how do I want to say this? As long as you recognize that I have it in me to do a cold call on you, who knows if it'll ever happen. I'm not trying to threaten you either. You don't enforce the security at all. I'm not climbing fences here. But we did have that conversation where it's like, okay, so, is it a central location? Do I drop by your house? And we talked about that, right? You're like, nah, that's cool. Let's just meet in a central place. So you pick it up. What do you remember from that conversation?
Well, I'm stuck on, I want to go back. So if you're telling me, hey, dude, Roland, I'm a cold caller, that could happen to you. I just told you I don't answer the door. So I could walk past the door and see you at the door and still not answer it. So then the game is on. Like, then are you just like, oh yeah, I knew that he might not answer the door and I just drove 2 hours. And I'm like, yeah, he just drove 2 hours, but I don't answer the door.
So then I'm texting you and I'm sending you some video from the Lancaster and say, okay, dude, I'm here now. And then what? You're showing up 20 minutes later? Like, okay, this is cool.
Well, let's add another layer.
Okay.
I have a family.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have a partner who might be like, who is this guy in our house? And why didn't you let me know somebody was coming over?
Right.
Like, there are layers here, right?
Well, the great thing is I wouldn't tell you. So then I'm giving you plausible deniability. You're like, I didn't even know he was coming over. I did not know.
Okay, so we've got to go back to the story. So you're the cold caller guy, and I'm just like, I think I land on you cold call, you take the risk of not getting the door open.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's just bottom line. Like, again, I'm at the point where, like, what are you going to say? Like, you're not going to be my friend anymore? Okay.
No. I think it'd be
I'm
pretty funny
saying,
though. I would
like,
I would love for this to be a conversation in a podcast where I actually did it. I have to be honest. I would love for like for us to talk about it afterwards, just so everyone's like, what the hell's going on between those two? Like who does that? Who drives that far? Or who doesn't sort of like answer the door? It's just us. That's how we roll.
we do it.
That's how we do it. Yeah. It's an adventure.
But the satisfaction, the relief of being able to speak your truth
Yep.
makes me feel good, because like I've told you, there are things we talk about on the on-ramp and the off-ramp that we'll never talk about on air.
Yeah.
Because some people can't handle that truth, or that truth might interfere with other modes of life that we live. And
that truth that we just shared with everyone, that secret truth about our relationship, does not inhibit my relationship to you. And the worst case scenario, I have to be honest, like with this in mind, is how would we ever function if we actually lived side by each?
Well, we'd know the parameters, right? We'd know it might be different then. It might be different because, for example, my kids have friends over, like the friends that live across the street. I've never been in their house and they've never been in my house, the adults. But the kids, my son goes over there and plays all the time, and their kids come over here. And it's funny because the dad and I really get along. We're buddies. And I would say that, like, we're friends, and my wife is comfortable with them. Therefore, my children are allowed to go into their house, and their children are allowed to come into my house. And there's no issue. Like, when they come in here, I might text him and say, dude, your daughter's here, like FYI. And he'll write back and say, thanks for letting me know. And then when my kid goes over there, he might text me and say, he's here, just so you know, because you told him to play in the front yard and now he's in our house. And that's cool. We trust them. They trust us. And that's nice. So in that way, if they come over and they say, if the kids come to the door, I'll answer the door, because I know they're not there to sell me anything. They're there to play with my kids. And that's different. That's different. But if you I worked with a guy that I like. He's I consider him my friend. I don't work with him anymore. And he needed something one day. He had to get into school and get something, but he was missing a piece that he needed for what he was doing. So he's like, dude, can I just come over and get your item so I can finish my thing? And I'm like, yeah, man, you can come over. What time are you coming? So he tells me, and instantly I felt like, oh God, like, do I invite him in? Do I make him coffee that I don't have? Because we don't drink coffee, so I don't have coffee to make for people. And anyway, long story short, he comes to the door, and I basically was like, this is unprecedented. Like, people don't just come to my house and then, like, it sounds so bad, but it's my truth. I don't know why I don't, my home is like my place to be where nobody else is. And I don't know, it's just weird. It's weird. But now, telling you how I operate with respect to my home, I don't go to other people's houses and cold call them and expect them to let me in and expect them to make me coffee. Like, so I don't, I'm not a hypocrite that way. You can find other ways where I am, but in that way, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not going to go and do that to you. So, like I was telling you last night, I was at my buddy's house. One of the hockey dads that I've known for, like, the boys have played together for like 3 years. And he invited me and a couple of other guys over. And it's funny because when I get there and, I brought some beverages for myself and I sit down, and then the other dad gets there, and it's funny. He comes in, he just makes himself at home. Like, he just goes in the kitchen, puts his stuff in the fridge, grabs a glass. Like he's like, to me, like he's intimately in this other guy's kitchen, just grabbing stuff, doing whatever. And I'm like, I'm dying the whole time. He didn't ask, like, hey, can I grab a glass and some ice or whatever? He just was doing it. And then I realized, well, some people are like that. Like, so the way this guy was acting in this other guy's house, if we were at his house, he'd be okay with us to just go grab stuff out of the fridge and from the cupboards. He's not a hypocrite that way either. And I respect that. But that's not who I am. That's not what I'm about. And I don't know why or where it comes from. It's just my home has always been the place for me to exist. And I don't really invite people to my home. It's just not it depends too. Like if you were living next door, it would be different, but you don't live next door. And the guy that lives across the street, if he comes over and his kids are in the house and he wants, like, and I don't have a problem saying, hey, do you want to come in and chill? We can watch the Jays while the kids play in the backyard or whatever. I can do that. I have the capacity. But I don't do that to him and he doesn't do that to me. I don't know. Are you an open door kind of person? You have some friends, they just want people in their house all the time. They don't mind who or when or what time. Are you like that, or are you lean more my way?
There's a third path. I'm the welcome you in, tell you when it's time to leave.
Tell me more about that. How do you tell somebody to leave? Like you just say, okay, thanks for coming. You got to go now.
Yeah. Or you start wrapping it up. You sort of say, like so my truth would be, so my buddy Damien, I'll tell him flat out, I'm like, dude, I'm tired. I'm getting tired. What do you say? 15 minutes, we wrap this up.
Now, what happens when you do that to people that don't read the message? You tell them 15 minutes and, they're like, okay, thanks for letting me know. And they just don't get up after 15.
I find they kind of do. Like part of it is, as far as randos coming into the house.
Randos.
Yeah, like it doesn't, so apart from all this, apart from everything that we're sort of throwing down here, is the idea of kind of where I started with what kind of tools do I feel like I have to make better friends at work? So at the heart of this is like the assumption that the assumption that the people around me are my friends is what I'm inquiring into. So that's what I'm pushing into. What is actually going on in front of me? Because I think that my mindset around who's in my space, I would think that whoever's ever around me, that they're okay with kind of me, that they sort of want to be around me, unless, in some choice at work, you don't have a choice. You got to work with people. But I'm constantly measuring now. I guess more so this year, I'm measuring, could I ask for more from the people around me? Not only professionally, but personally. Could I ask for more? And if I felt like I couldn't, why is that? What is it that I'm holding back? Because I would never say that. Like, for instance, I'll go back to when so 3 years ago, when I was at the school and my father, it was in November. So it was like, kind of in the tail end of semester one. And when I was going through that, traveling from school, leaving school, driving to Oshawa to be at the hospital, like it was sort of from September all the way through November. There was a lot of back and forth, and coming back and teaching the next day, then getting in the car and driving back to Oshawa again to be with my dad and my mom. My dad was in the hospital. So I had many times where I'm driving back that night, and it could have been, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight by the time I was back on the road. So there was a good 45 minutes to an hour where I was projecting myself into the next school day and thinking about, because I know Karen would have been up and she would have been, looking to support me and have conversations when I get home. But I really started thinking, like, who is it that I could also get support from and talk? Who can I connect with at school? And I started to I questioned, like, well, why do I want that? I've got Karen. I've got, like, I could talk to my kids, Karen. I could talk to her parents. I could talk to my mom. And I started to realize that I think I wanted more people to be able to talk about it. Not necessarily that I was going to get any better information, but I started to appreciate that net of support, like just having people around you that kind of understood what was going on with me. Now, I'll put this in parallel to what you had said about kind of rocking your truth. What truths do I have that I would like other people to understand about me? And, you know, going through the process of with my father, it's a very specific sort of emotional thing. I mean, there's other stuff, you know, there are pieces of me that select people know. There's pieces of me that I've never shared. And then there's pieces of me that I project widely. So I've started to look at the impact of those sort of decisions to sort of keep parts of myself from the people around me, and starting to realize for me that when I feel like I want to be social, that I might not have done the legwork to actually create some sort of a social net, that I'm not taking enough risk. I'm not pushing myself into that uncomfort zone to meet people, get to know people beyond, let's say, the digital connections that I have. And I really it's funny. I am the guy that, like, there are people that I'm in like neck deep in this amazing equity conversation with a colleague of mine at school. Like, it's just actually two separate ones. And give you two different things that are kind of remarkable. So one colleague, neck deep, really, really, like, I'm just really enjoying the conversation of trying to pull apart some of these pieces to understand the componentry of actioning equity at school. And then we'll pass each other in the hall. And it's like, hey, how's it going? How's it going? And then we're back into this conversation. So there's this weird, it messes with my head. I'm like, how can I have such like this great conversation, really connected, where, and it's also, we're sharing personal experience informed with research that we're doing, and kind of pushing the envelope in conversation online. And yet we pass each other in the hall. It's like, hey, like, just so cool and calm. Another situation, there's another person that I'm deep in this conversation with, similar conversation, slightly different, but again, somehow I'm in the zone of personal professional development. This person will actually sidle up to me and walk with me to where I'm sort of going, and just kind of easily share space with me and move with me in a way that I think to myself, you know, there's a social element to this that's very different than it is with the other person. Our conversation, I would say, it's not as differentiated. Like, the person B that I'm talking about now, when we talk online and we talk in person, it's a little bit more equal. It's not quite as, like, you know, really high online and really low in person. But the other person has said, and I found myself saying it, I'll walk with you and we'll keep talking. So it's not just passing in the hall and then fiercely going digital. It's actually, we're going to pass in the hall. One of us will actually keep walking with the other person. I value both relationships, but both of those relationships make me think about, how can I contribute more to grow this type of a relationship? And I think about that in relation to my own friends. I think about something like that with, you know, getting to know more about you. And I do, you know, even some of the people that do come into my house with regularity, it's funny how, like, when our friends come over for game night, like, we're going over, I think I've told you, neighbors that we kind of moved into the same townhouse complex, and then we both moved out. We were friends before we had kids, and so we meet up with them kind of once a month, and we're going to their place they're coming to our place for games night. And sometimes it's like, yeah, you know what, we'll probably hang until 10 p.m. Other times it's open-ended and all of a sudden it's 11 p.m. But what I feel like is, we could always say at the table, if you were tired, it's like, you know what, this is the last hand, or when the kids finish the movie, or like, we're able to call it out according to what our truth is if somebody's tired, someone needs to hit the sack, we can just say the words. So it's not as simple as just, do I like having people around in the house? I do, until I don't. And then I'll say, it's time to go home. We got to wrap up. I try and make it, it's funny. I'm really trying to make it about how I feel in the moment and not how I think I'll be feeling in a half an hour or how I think I was feeling just before that. Am I happy to have you around me right now? And the kids that come over to visit, we have neighbors that have said, yeah, like they new neighbors that we're still getting to know. They say when they moved from here, they said their house was kind of like all the kids would go and play there. Like it was kind of like the hub. And quite often, what I've started to do now is I've accepted that as their reality because they've offered that. So we'll get home from school and one of my kids will say like, yeah, I want to go on the computer. I'm like, no. You go down and call on those kids because they want to play with you. Like I'll actually direct them to go do it. Now, what's interesting is this summer will be kind of like a year since this family has moved in. We've been in that house a lot because we had previous friends that lived there, but we have not yet been over there for any event. Like we haven't been into the house. They haven't been into ours, but our kids have been in each other's houses. But I've said in my mind this summer, they're coming over for a barbecue. Like we're going to start to build something there with that family too. So it's a very parental response because the kids are young. Their kids are very young. My kids are pretty young. And I think of the benefit of having lifelong friends on your street. Like I think about that was kind of like a thing for me too. Like just being able to kind of go out on the street and know that they have friends and places they can go and land. Long rambly again. But it's me when you ask me about, do I want people in my house? Am I more the type to kind of protect my space or to have people in the house? I'm both. I'm really both. When I was growing up, my dad was a little bit more kind of like the one-to-one guy. Like he liked to sort of just like what you and I are doing right now. I think I get that sense from him. My mom was the one, yeah, invite him over, bring him over. It's all good. Our house was sort of like the crash pad for a lot of friends too, that were not connecting well with their own families. Like they had some stuff going on at home.
I suspect that as time goes on and my oldest son becomes more of a teenager, if you will, I suspect that I will be more at ease with and laid back with the idea of having people here for him because I would rather they be here than he be out. And so, and a few times that's happened, like his friends will stop by. They don't stop by often, but lately they haven't because the weather's been nice. They stop by and they're like, hey, you want to come out? We're riding our bikes or whatever. My wife and I encourage that. We tell them, yeah, get your helmet, get your scooter or whatever and go. Like you've played enough video games, spend some time outside, get some air. Your friends called on you. But I think as they get older and, teenagers do what they do, he'd probably tell them come over whenever you want because that's more his style.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as I'm prepared, like when I start understanding that he's doing that, then I'll be more prepared to have people here so that I know that my son's doing okay, so I can already see and feel that shift is going to come. I can't be so rigid that I force him to leave and go to their house,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine sometimes. But I would say for the majority, he's the one, from what I'm hearing, he's the one that sits down with his family to eat dinner every night together, right? Like other kids don't have that experience for whatever reason. And so I want to show my kids that if your friends want to come over here and you guys want to hang and I know what you're up to and you're both safe, you have food to eat and it's warm, whatever, come on in.
Mm-hmm.
Because my wife has said several times, like, would you rather he be here acting like a doofus in the basement with his friends, or would you rather we not know where he is exactly and what he's getting into because of our issues of not, wanting to host people.
Right.
And I don't always say this to my wife face to face, but she makes a great point and I agree with it. So I suspect things are going to turn because as he gets older, the social group becomes very important, and I want him to have people over here if they want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not. It's just not my. I don't feel it. Like I just don't. I'd rather when I come home, it's my safe space, and sometimes you just don't want people in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha.
So
You go.
I was just gonna say. So this is where we're landing here as we end this, as it's time for you to go now, Chris, because
I love it.
I
But
have.
we've always been cool with that, like what you're doing right now, because we don't have a tidy script that we're working from, right? So it does really come down to one of us saying, dude, that's it. I'm calling it.
So we're landing on the time where the lawn is calling my name, the day is calling my name. So I'm going to let you have the last word, and then we can unplug this one.
I've been thinking again about what it would be like to leave education. I know. I didn't have that loaded up like I was going to tell you. And I know I've done that once or twice. Like, that's sort of like, what the heck? Like, what are you dropping that for at this point? But yeah, and I don't have a tidy way to exit out of that. But that's what's on my mind.
I lied about you having the last word. So it's funny. That's like. So what you're doing right now is like, you come over to my house, we're hanging out. I tell you, okay, dude, let's wrap it up. It's I got things to do that need to get done, and then you're like, you drop something on me that's just huge. Like, yeah, man, I'm gonna get a new job, and then I'm supposed. Well, knowing me, I'd probably just say, okay, great, congratulations, it's time for you to go. We'll talk more about your new job the next time you come over. Because hey, you're the one that drops it on me at the last minute, and you expect me to accommodate, and I'm not very accommodating. So, but I did want to say this week is grade 3 EQAO testing at my school, at probably most schools in the province, if not all. And maybe the next time we talk, you can tell me more about your thinking about exiting education, and I can tell you a little bit about how this week goes, or how it went, doing grade 3 testing for the first time. What do you say? Deal?
Yeah, sounds good, man.
I'm starting to get used to you dropping this. Yeah, I've been toying with leaving EDU. The first time you did it was a major shock to my system, but this is like the fourth or the fifth time you've said it, so it's starting to become old hat.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why exactly it pops up for me.
And it's not.
It's not reactionary. Like, this isn't me. This isn't me. Like, there's a whole lot of people right now that are just like, they're saying things on socials like, oh, it's the end of the year, I can't wait for the school year to be done. I'm done. Like, I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy that's sort of looking at May like I'm any more fatigued than I am in September. I'm equally fatigued the whole year long. Like, I don't have that sort of build up. So this isn't me saying I'm looking to get out because I feel like I need to get away from education. It's I think it's more, you and I have had this conversation before. I'm being kind of future hopeful, as in, are there other things that I would like to do? And I mean, yours and mine, I know it's old hat for you, but I said it to Karen a couple nights ago, and she just kind of looked at me. She's like she's doing all the calculation around that, right? But yeah, I'm not pulling the chute on this.
But the fact that you're talking about it, because that's how it starts, right? The talk, you start well, you start thinking of it in your head, and then when it gets out of your head and it becomes a little bit more real when you talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it could move into action.
It could. So part of it is I'm not entirely sure what that action would look like. I'm not like I don't have a plan, but it is something it occurred to me. God, it's I guess it's kind of that living the best life. Part of it too, I'll admit it does when I see people talking about, and it's that Pinterest post thing that kind of where I get triggered. Where I get triggered when I look at people's posts about their classrooms and teaching is when people are saying things on there like, I'm just so honored to have this job. Like I'm like all this sort of like the lauds that people feel for being involved in education. I'm not disputing those awards and that sense of satisfaction, but I also am really aware of there's other parts of me that don't get satisfied by being a teacher. They just don't. I have other interests and other distractions that really are what help fortify my existence in education. And I don't know if I would ever put education as the center of my universe. I don't naturally do that. So in doing so, it opens up, like I'm not so locked down in my thinking that teaching is going to be forever. You know what I mean? Like it's not my forever job. Building a plan to leave it, we've talked about this, is difficult because it does support and fortify and provide, right? So part of me is thinking, that's it, just trying to think of the next. What could the next be?
Okay. Well, time for you to leave my house.
Get out, Cliff. Get out. I'm just like, one more shot, Roland. Just one more shot. Come on, just a small one. One more shot.
Hopefully we'll be talking sooner than later. Say something so that your screen takes over.
The sketch for today.
Oh, God, somebody ringing the doorbell. That makes me uneasy just looking at it.
Does it?
It does.
All right. It's our podcast. Our podcast does that. We're ringing other people's doorbells. If they happen to pick us up or they happen to listen to us, we're getting in their heads. We're getting in their house.
Okay, if you say so.
I need more coffee. I got to go do lawn too, so.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too, man.
See ya.
Ciao.